For the last couple of decades, schools have poured billions and billions of dollars into digital tools. We're talking laptops, tablets, smartboards, the whole shebang. The big promise was that this would completely revolutionize learning. But has it? Let's take a real look at what the evidence actually says.
I mean, this is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? We've given our students all this incredible technology, but are we seeing incredible results to match? Is just having more tech automatically better for learning?
Well, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to lean on a huge landmark review by the OECD. They waded through just mountains of research to cut through the hype and see what's really going on with these digital tools. So let's dive in and see what they found. Okay, first up, let's tackle one of the biggest trends in educational technology, teaching kids how to code. The whole idea is to get them ready for the future by playing with programming and robotics.
And this right here really gets to the heart of it. On one hand, you've got the big promise, building these amazing problem-solving skills using fun, creative tools. But on the other hand, there's often this huge wall between those simple tools and, real-world coding. Making that jump can be a massive hurdle, and it can totally overwhelm students before they've even got the basics down.
So, what is this computational thinking that everyone's talking about? Well, it's not really about just typing code. It's more like a mental toolkit for taking on any problem. Think of it like planning a big party. You have to break it down into smaller jobs, invites, food, music. Then you look for patterns and make a step-by-step plan. That's it. That's computational thinking, and you can apply it to pretty much anything.
And the research shows a really clear pattern here. For younger kids, visual stuff like Scratch is just fantastic. It lets them focus on the fun part, the logic and creativity, without getting all bogged down in picky spelling and semicolons. But for older students, you really need text-based languages like Python to build those practical, real-world skills. The key takeaway, though, the bridge between those two worlds is super shaky, and that's where a lot of students just fall off.
This chart really drives that point home. Check this out. When we look at educational robots, the impact on problem-solving skills for primary students is through the roof. It's super high. But then, look what happens with middle schoolers. That impact drops way down. It's a huge clue that the tool's effectiveness is really, really tied to the age and developmental stage of the kid using it.
Okay, so coding is one thing, but what about skills that are even more fundamental? The bedrock of education. Let's talk about reading and writing. Can all these new digital tools actually make a difference with these age-old skills?
And here we go again, right? We see that same classic battle between the big promise and the sometimes messy reality. The idea of using videos and animations to make stories more engaging, it sounds great. But the research flags a really serious risk. If those little interactive features, the clickable animations or minigames, aren't directly related to the story, they can actually hurt comprehension because they just distract the brain. This brings us to a really fascinating and maybe surprising finding. It's called the screen inferiority effect. Study after study shows that when you're dealing with long, complicated stuff, we tend to understand and remember it better when we read it on good old-fashioned paper. Why? Well, on screens, our brains are just wired to skim and scan, which is great for finding a phone number, but terrible for deep, thoughtful reading. And the reason for this really comes down to something called cognitive load theory. Think of your working memory kind of like the RAM in your computer. It can only handle so much at once. So if an app is just jam-packed with distracting animations and pop-ups, it's like trying to run a dozen programs at the same time. It just eats up all your mental RAM and leaves very little brain power for the actual learning part. But it is not all that news for screens. In fact, here's where the story takes a huge turn. When we switch from reading to writing, technology isn't just a little bit helpful, it can be an absolute game changer.
And the proof is right here. Look at this number, an effect size of 1.10. Now, that might not mean much to you, but in the world of educational research, that is huge. I mean, absolutely massive. To put it simply, for students with learning disabilities, tech tools like spell check or text-to-speech are profoundly helpful. They provide the support these students need to get their ideas out of their heads and onto the page. It's just a powerful, powerful case for tech as a tool for equity.
So what about the most hyped up area of all, game-based learning? Can we really take the incredible engagement of video games and harness it for the classroom? I mean, of course games are motivating. They give you clear goals, instant feedback, a sense of control. What's not to love? The promise is that all that fun will translate into deep learning. But here's the catch. The biggest challenge that researchers keep running into is something called transfer. Just because a student can solve a super complex puzzle inside a video game, that doesn't automatically mean they can use that same logic on a math test or in a history class.
And the world of educational games is, well, it's huge. You've got serious games built specifically to teach math or science. You've got role-playing games for building empathy and language skills. Then there are sandbox games like Minecraft that are all about creativity and teamwork. And you even have exer games that get kids up and moving. Each one has its own potential superpower.
So the crucial point here isn't just about finding a fun game. It's about being really intentional about building those educational bridges. How do we make sure that the problem-solving skills a student learns in some fantasy world actually get applied to their real-world homework? That right there is the billion-dollar question for game-based learning. So we've looked at coding, literacy, and gaming. 3 pretty different areas, right? But what's so fascinating is that the research reveals this single, unifying theme that connects every single one of them.
Because after sifting through all this evidence, the OECD report comes to a really powerful conclusion. The single most important factor, the one thing that determines whether classroom tech succeeds or completely fails, it has very little to do with the device or the software itself.
It's the teacher. It all comes down to the teacher. Success lives or dies based on how that tool is being used. Is it for the right reason, at the right moment in the lesson, to support a really specific learning goal? And most critically, is it all being guided by a skilled teacher who knows how to make those smart, strategic choices? A tool is only ever as good as the teaching strategy behind it.
And honestly, this quote from the report just says it all, doesn't it? Technology is not a substitute for great teaching. It's a potential amplifier of it. The focus shouldn't be on the gadget, but on the teacher's professional judgment about when and why and how to use it effectively.
Which really leaves us with this one final big thought. The whole debate about classroom tech, it's not really about if we should use it. I mean, that ship has sailed. The real urgent question we all need to start asking is about the how. How are we training our teachers? How are we designing our lessons? And how do we make sure that every single digital tool is there to serve a clear, powerful, and human-led purpose?